don't know that, but I will find out before the end of the meeting today. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Try that in. Good afternoon. It gives me a great deal of pride and pleasure to introduce you to the first Transgender Allies Summit. And you know, the timing couldn't be any better because, as you might have heard, not only across the country, but recently what we're calling the Transgender Discrimination Bill has been introduced in Tallahassee, which basically can put me in jail for not having the right gender marker on my driver's license. Or if I use the restroom and I have to, if I get challenged by someone, I have to produce my papers. And you stop and think, it's like, is this Nazi Germany that we have to produce papers to use the restroom? ID to P. Discrimination at its ugliest and its most blatant, that's being absolutely smoke-screened in the guise of personal privacy and protections in the bathroom. So it couldn't be a better time for us to get together. I welcome all of you that are here. I welcome the organizations that are here and who will be speaking. I certainly would like to give a special shout out to Patricia Newton, who is here from the city, and she is the Assistant to Director of Human Relations. Let's give her a hand. A stalwart of diversity and inclusion, and we're so thankful that you're here. Collateral material is on the table in the back, and we would encourage you to take some material with you. Our goals for today, and I'll be somewhat brief because we do have a full agenda and we have a lot of dynamic and informative speakers who I want to get in front of you. But our goals are twofold. Number one is so often within our own organizations, even in Central Florida, we're working in a silo in the fact that we might not know what our sister or brother organizations are doing just right down the street. And in a time when the transgender community has never been more visible, has never been more in the crosshairs of discrimination, now is certainly the time for us to join together and build a town around this community. And that's what we need. There's never been a time, it's kind of the perfect storm. We've never been more visible. And we absolutely must be visible to increase awareness, which then increases education, which then increases equality of the transgender community. But we need to do this together, not working in a silo. So what we've attempted to do, and I think you're going to have a very informative afternoon, is we brought together organizations from all over Central Florida. Organizations who support the transgender community in all kinds of different ways and in all kinds of different demographics and age groups. And I'm very pleased that these organizations have decided to come together and share their services and how we can all work together to support the transgender community as this rapidly emerging demographic continues to be more and more visible. In my role as Transgender Inclusion Director at Equality Florida, I always tell my friends at Equality Florida that I perhaps have the best job in the world. I absolutely love what I do. Even though it's a challenge, nothing is more gratifying than working with major corporations who absolutely support inclusion and want to present and have an open and welcoming and inclusive workplace. Working with many enlightened elected officials who assist us in passing human rights ordinances all over the state, where now over 53% of the population of the state of Florida is covered by fully inclusive human rights ordinances, including a unanimous vote by the city of Orlando. Yay. But then lastly, to come together in strength and on the right side of history to fight against discriminatory practices that we're seeing that are coming out against the transgender community. And that's kind of the next frontier. You know, as marriage equality has finally arrived, and we certainly are optimistic that the Supreme Court is going to validate that in April. We're finding that the transgender community, as I said, is now in the crosshairs of discrimination. And with our visibility comes the animosity, the lack of understanding, the hatred, and the discrimination. So together we can change that. And we change that through just that: awareness, education, sharing each other's stories and what each organization is doing to support the community, so we can build on that solid foundation of solidarity. So with that, we're going to get started. And our first speaker comes to us from Jacksonville, bless her heart, braving all the way the traffic on I-4 from Jacksonville here. Representing We Are Straight Allies, it gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce Shabara Orin.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It is really an honor to be here. And as Gina mentioned, I am Shabara Orin. I'm the founder and co-creator of We Are Straight Allies. It's a human rights campaign dedicated to supporting equality for the LGBT community, and more specifically, helping to pass a fully comprehensive human rights ordinance in the city of Jacksonville. I'm really honored to be with you here today, and I'll talk a little bit about this in a few minutes, why. I just spent the weekend in Selma, Alabama, walking across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, honoring those people that marched 50 years ago. And so as I think about standing here today, 50 years after the passage of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, it is monumental because we are gathered in this place in a way that would not have been possible just a few short years ago. And the other thing that's super special about today is I am celebrating my life. It's my birthday. And I can't imagine a more beautiful way than to honor my history, my legacy, and my future than standing before you as an ally, an advocate, and a comrade as we champion freedom, justice, and equality. I am often asked why this specific work. The easy answer is that it's the right thing to do. Right? The more complex and personal response is that I am a daughter of the South and the civil rights movement. I am named after Che Guevara, the Argentinian revolutionary. My mother is a white Jewish civil rights, human rights, women's liberation activist, and my father was one of the fiery lieutenants of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was behind many of the major strategies of the civil rights movement, including the 1963 Children's Crusade in Birmingham that ultimately led to the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. My first vivid memory of community activism and advocacy was sleeping in a concrete tube across the street from the White House. For those of you who are old enough to remember, you used to be able to get to that park across the street. I see some heads nodding. You can't now because of security. But we were sleeping inside of concrete tubes, drinking water and eating rice, and we were protesting famine in Pakistan, and we were also supporting the Bangladesh Liberation War. I was 3 years old when that happened. I founded We Are Straight Allies shortly after arriving in Jacksonville, Florida, a little over 2 years ago. I moved there fall of 2012, and the week that I arrived in town, it was my welcome to Jacksonville, the Human Rights Ordinance failed by 1 vote. I was in that city council room, 500 people, standing room only, and to my right was an older white gentleman, probably in his late 60s, early 70s, and he was wearing a rainbow lapel pin, and he had tears streaming down his face, and he was sobbing and shaking. And behind me was another man who looked as though he could have been his brother, his biological brother, and he was wearing a Confederate pin, and he was cheering. And I was thinking, my mind was swirling. I couldn't wait to get back to my car and call my husband to ask him, what the hell are we doing in Jacksonville? We have moved to a community that can't pass a comprehensive Human Rights Act. And as quickly as I posed the question, I knew the answer. We were in Jacksonville. My father was in Birmingham. And you are here today to impact change. Because the reality is that we have many opportunities each and every day to do just that. And what I've learned through a personal journey filled with tragedy and triumph is that we never, ever need seek permission to create. We never need seek permission to challenge unjust systems of oppression, to join hands in solidarity, to stand boldly, courageously, for something that looms so much larger than ourselves. One of our straight allies in our campaign is Louis Lopez, whose daughter Nina is transgender. We've reproduced, this ad is also in English, but it's in Spanish because we believe in communicating with people in the way that they communicate. We have a rabbi ad also in Hebrew and English, and we have a postcard being printed in Braille. When we interviewed Louis, because the campaign is both a print ad and video campaign, he was telling us that he thought his daughter was initially gay when his daughter was his son, and he said it that way. And then throughout the entire interview, he interchanged pronouns, he shook his head, he got very confused, and he kept apologizing. He kept saying, I'm so sorry, I'm going to get this right, I promise I'm going to get this right. And then ultimately what he said was, all I know is that I love my child. He said, and that's all that I know. And I know that I will always love my child. Whether my child is John or Nina or something else, I will love my child, and that's all that I know. And that's what I know, that I love our humanness, whatever shape or form it comes in. And that's why I do this work. While I may not share the exactness of your lived transgender experiences, I do know discrimination and bigotry. I know what it feels like for a community to be fractured with widening chasms that separate us because of our uniqueness. I know that we are inextricably bound, and I know that I am not free if you are not free. One of my favorite authors and activists, and she's a self-described, she's no longer living, but self-described feminist lesbian activist, Audre Lorde, reminds us that it is not our differences that divide us. It is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. So in Jacksonville, before I walked into the fire of creating change in a community that might not have quite been ready for the type of direct action that I was born into, I remembered my legacy. And I remembered living in a big house on Marjorie Street in Memphis, Tennessee with Black Panthers until the police came one day and surrounded the house with tear guns and gas. I remembered food stamp lines and welfare worker home visits. They searched under beds and interrogated us about whether or not we had any uncles living in the house, and once they counted a television without sight or sound as an asset. I remember Mr. Jack, my white next-door neighbor, sitting on his porch with a shotgun, pointing at me and my sister as he called us nigger girls and half-breed. And the wonderful Saturday we came home from Girl Scouts, and he had spray-painted the side of the house with nigger-loving hunky. And what my mother said about that was, girls, Mr. Jack sits on that porch and he is mired with bigotry and hatred and racism, and that is his problem. And I remember thinking, yeah, but I'm 9, and if he pulls that trigger of that shotgun, it's going to definitely be our problem because we'll be splattered across that lawn. And when I was 12, what I realized she meant is that even if he had killed us and the world was devoid of 2 little brown girls, that it would have still been his problem. And when Gina and I and so many others in Jacksonville spent last year going back and forth to Atlantic Beach, and we heard vicious hatred spewing from community members about the transgender community, I remembered what my mother said. And I remembered that it was their problem. I was reminded time and time again of her wisdom and her patience and her love of humanity, which helps keep me sane and sound in this work. We've been able to do some amazing things in Jacksonville. We hosted a transgender panel with State of the Reunion, which is a nationally syndicated NPR show with host Al Letson at the Museum of Contemporary Art. We also leveraged our relationship with the Florida Times-Union, historically a very, very conservative newspaper in our community. And they ran for the first time ever a story about transgender lives, and they featured Trisha Russell, who does a lot of work with us in Jacksonville, and Cam W., a young Black transgender man. And we provided ally training to hundreds of people in the city of Jacksonville. At the heart of our ally movement is the critical understanding of the roots of our connection and the price that was paid for our freedom. And I reflected upon that an awful lot this weekend in Selma, Alabama, the real price and the real cost of freedom. And so for me, the question always remains, what's going to be my lasting contribution? What will the history books say about me or you? Will we be a footnote, or will there be volumes about the movement, this amazing movement for transgender equality that we are leading, that we are supporting? I suppose the single question that I ask myself every single day is someone else's life better because I lived? Is someone else's life better because I lived? We are standing at a crossroads, and I was never more clear about that than this weekend in Selma, because I believe we have two choices, and our movement is based on that. We have two choices in this world, and it's to engage or not. History often repeats itself. When Florida became the 36th state to legalize gay marriage, I thought of Congressman John Lewis and Coretta Scott King, who tirelessly were in support of LGBT equality long before it became mainstream. I thought of Fannie Lou Hamer and Harry Belafonte and Harriet Tubman and Jimmy Lee Jackson, and I thought of Bayard Rustin, who was jailed not only for his Quaker faith, but for practicing homosexuality in the 60s. Our ally movement is one of solidarity, which to me means walking with a group that's being oppressed rather than working for a group that's searching for freedom. And our statement is simple. We are mothers and fathers teaching our children to love and accept each other's intrinsic humanness. We are sisters and brothers holding the hands of our siblings with great pride in who they are. We are co-workers who want to see our colleagues treated fairly, free from bias and discrimination. We are young and old who believe that we live in the land of the free, where all people are created equal. We are clergy and missionaries, shepherding our congregations to welcome everyone into their hearts, openly and without judgment. We are veterans who have fought for the freedom of others across the ocean and who will continue to fight for basic human rights on our own native soil. We are citizens who believe in everyone's right to pursue their own happiness. From Stonewall to the demise of DOMA to the recent federal legislation, we are the family and friends of Harvey Milk, Marco McMillian, Matthew Shepard, Ebony Whitaker, Amanda Gonzalez Andular, Deshonda Sanchez, Lamia Beard, Ty Underwood, Leela Alcorn, Taja de Jesus, and Penny Proud. We are following in the legacy of other great movements, the abolitionist movement, the women's suffrage movement, the Eastern European liberation movement, the farm workers movement, the civil rights movement, and the feminist movement. We are adding our voices to the growing chorus in this fight. We are friends, we are family, we are co-workers, we are communities, we are straight allies, because nothing is more important than our humanity. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. reminded us that human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. Every step toward the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle, the tireless exertions and passionate concern of dedicated individuals. I know that I stand upon the shoulders and shoulder to shoulder with creators and builders and dreamers and catalysts. I stand with transgender activists Gina Duncan and Cam W. and Trisha Russell, and one of the fiercest freedom fighters that I know down in Houston, Monica Roberts. Today, like every day, is one of possibility. And I stand here with you today, knowing that there is incredible possibility in this fight as we move towards freedom and justice. Every day, what I think about when we do this work is that we are able to define and redefine the work. We are able to define and redefine ourselves, and our commitment in our community to ourselves and to each other, we know will be our enduring legacy as allies. Thoreau said it best. He said, most people lead lives of quiet desperation and go to the grave with songs still in them. Most people lead lives of quiet desperation and go to the grave with songs still in them. So we challenge our allies. We challenge them to sing while they're here. We challenge them to sing a song of freedom and justice. We challenge them to sing a song that builds a better world. We have made progress. We are making progress. but that does not mean that we still don't have a long way to go. The road to freedom is long and arduous. Again, that was never more clear to me than when I marched across that bridge, because there we were marching across that bridge, the same bridge that my father and Dr. King and Ambassador Young and John Lewis marched across 50 years ago. And here we are in this same country pushing Congress to do something about the stringent voter ID rules and other voting rules that are taking us back and stripping away the voting rights that those people fought so hard for. I do believe in my lifetime, and I didn't believe this a few years ago, and I'm not quite sure exactly what changed, but I do believe in my lifetime. While I'm here, we will see LGBT equality in this nation, in every state, in every city, in every town, in every little hamlet. Dr. King talked about the fierce urgency of now, and one of my favorite quotes is, he says, "We are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. This is no time for apathy or complacency. This is a time for vigorous and positive action. This is a time for vigorous and positive action." And I say, if not now, then when? If not you and me, then who? Thank you.
I'm very pleased and thrilled at the organizations that are here. And our next organization or our next speaker actually represents and wears several hats. And I think she wouldn't have it any other way. She heads up the T Network, which is for the first time, one of the few growing, dynamic, informative transgender networks in Orlando. She's a senior leader at Lockheed Martin. Are you on the board of the MBA? Or
Not officially, through the T Network.
Through the T Network, she's working with our LGBT Chamber of Commerce, the Metropolitan Business Association, and it gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce Jennifer Kurzawa to speak to us. Thank you. I knew I'd mess up that name.
Okay, I have to stop and just go, wow, because you got me so pumped up. I was over there like, oh wait, no, I have to speak now. And so we'll start off with, for me, everybody help me for a minute. Raise your hand if public speaking makes you nervous. Great, level the playing field. All right, because, okay. All right, so as Gina said, I'll give a little bit about myself. My name is Jennifer Kurzawa, and I am a native Floridian. Been in Orlando for 20 years. I went to college here, and I have now been with Lockheed Martin for 13 years. I'm in their information security field as a project manager. I also have the privilege of leading our corporate division's Pride organization and a host of other things there. And they do, to say that they support me in my endeavors would be an understatement. They're one of the biggest reasons that I'm here. Just a little personal plug, I also have an amazing 8-year-old daughter and a wonderful supportive girlfriend who's sitting right there taking a picture of me. And but interestingly, as much as I obviously am very young, right, I spent most of my life really unaware of the broad spectrum of diversity that exists in our world, right? I was always a very, open-minded person. Really didn't start to come into being into who I was until college. And even in college, where I got to spend 1 year as the president of at that time it was the Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual Student Union, transgender wasn't even in my vocabulary yet. Queer wasn't in my vocabulary. I was very ignorant, and so I have a lot of compassion, and I really try to share that compassion with this community that so much of what we're dealing with is ignorance and lack of awareness. Right, more than hatred, and I think that just opens up a lot of doors. And so I came in to my understanding of this whole community, initially very ignorant and unaware. And so to also kind of give you a little bit of why I'm here, right? So you look at me, I'm not transgender. Why is Jennifer doing this? Why is this so important to me? About 8 years ago, when I was just kind of getting into my role at Lockheed, I was at an event. It wasn't a Lockheed event. And meeting other people, networking with other professionals in the industry. And I met someone and started becoming friends with them and found out through that friendship that they identified as queer. And I was like, cool, what's that? You know, I was so open and wanted to understand, and I think they thought it was really weird. But luckily for me, that person chose to educate me. And through our friendship and through that, education, they started to share with me that they had been considering transitioning. Now, they never came out to me and said, I'm transgender. But one of the things that became very, very clear to me was that the entire world looked at this person and saw a woman. And this person looked inside themselves and saw a man. And all I knew was I wanted my friend to be happy. And they were not happy. And I was blessed with the pleasure over the next year or two of kind of going on this journey with them as they transitioned. And as I watched him become unleashed, right, and free from his cage. And then all of the struggle that went along with that, right? The physical pain and emotional trauma. He lost his partner. He lost friends. And I'm sorry if I get emotional on this. He lost some of his family, And on top of that, I actually watched somebody who was a peer of mine in the industry who had way more education than I did, such a brilliant person, no longer accepted by his coworkers. And his leadership team didn't support him. And it wasn't over. He wasn't fired, but as a result, he chose to leave that job. And I'll tell you right now, they lost an amazing employee. And to this day, he is working to rebuild his career and rebuild his life. And, luckily, even though his career didn't survive, because he chose to embrace his true self, he survived. And now he's a happy person. But I walked away from that experience a changed person. I walked away from that experience saying, that is not okay. And that doesn't need to happen. And I immediately went back to my work and I said, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do now, but I need to do something. And I knew from that point on that I wanted to get involved in this community. And so I looked internally, because like I said, Lockheed happens to be pretty supportive, and I had just really started to be my whole self at work. And as you know, happy to say Lockheed Martin maintains its 100% equality index score. For 3 years in a row now, we've hosted an internal LGBT leadership forum at our corporate headquarters that has top-level support. We support important organizations like Out and Equal and Out for Work, right? We're out there actually sending people and getting them educated. So I took advantage of that. And in 2013, for the first time, I actually went to Out and Equal. And I sat in on several presentations from their transgender track. I also connected with a fellow employee there by the name of Christine Bland. She's actually out of Denver, but she's a Lockheed employee. And in 2013, she started the Transgender Council at Lockheed Martin. And after Out and Equal, I reached out to her and said, I want to be on your council. How can I be on your council? And so together with several others, that council since then, we've been working on creating things like a consistent process for transitioning in the workplace across Lockheed Martin as a corporation. Checklist, the minimum things you just have to have so that everybody has the same experience. Because I was realizing that while my company absolutely stands for these individuals, you go to different sites, you have people that have different levels of understanding and knowledge, and it gets back to that ignorance aspect sometimes. And so I can proudly say we're doing a lot of work right now around what it's like to transition at Lockheed Martin. And I can more proudly say that for the first time, Lockheed actually started participating in, and I'm going to have to read it because I mess up the name, the award from Nogglestep, which Christine Bland won in 2014 as the LGBT Engineer of the Year which is a very high-level award. And I'll go step, oh, found it. Sorry, I don't use all my notes. So, National Organization of Gay and Lesbian Scientists and Technical Professionals. So not only was this Lockheed's first year nominating anyone, but we nominated an amazing engineer, an amazing woman who had just transitioned at Lockheed around 3 years before that. And she's a phenomenal individual. So a lot of great things happening at my work. But transitioning and being a valued professional in the community is more than workplace guidelines and policies, and it expands beyond the office walls. And that's where the T Network comes in. So the T Network, as you mentioned, is Orlando's Transgender Professionals Resource Group. We're young, we're still growing. Around this time last year, in fact, is when I sat down with the MBA. Really just a brainstorming session. I shared with them, my passion for this community and my vision. And it was like a heartbeat. They said, do it. Let's do it. Here's our resources. Here's our support. And I sat down and I wrote out our mission, which there's papers in the back too if you'd like more information. But it's to enable and empower our transgender and ally community by connecting, sharing best practices, building awareness, and educating the whole community. So in June of 2014, we held our first planning session, just a few of us at a table at the MBA headquarters. And in July, we actually had our first public event. And then shortly after this, the center also came on board. Our LGBT, I know you're speaking later, but they came on board as another supporter and a sponsor, and we really began to grow. At our second event, I actually handed out a survey to find out what people were looking to get out of this organization. And we need to do that again because the organization is growing. But it really was hitting on what transgender professionals, what transgender people in this community want and need. And some of those things were obvious stuff I was thinking of, like resume assistance, information on transitioning at work. But then we started uncovering things that I think a lot of us even forget exist. There are so many hidden challenges that somebody who does not go through that have no idea. For life insurance, great example, right? How do you find a life insurance company that's going to respect and identify you as the gender that you identify as versus your birth certificate, right? Things like that. So the group is really there to provide a lot of resources to this community. But not only that, it's there to show Orlando, and I keep trying to remind businesses, especially ally businesses, people that want to be a part of this community to come out, because it's really there to show Orlando that this is a part of your community, a part of your thriving community. We don't meet in little back rooms. We meet in public, restaurants. We meet, out in the open saying, this is who we are, we're here, we're an amazing part of your community. We show up, we treat that restaurant well. They don't even know what's walking in their door, right? And by the time we walk out, though, I guarantee you they want us to come back, right? And that grows our community as well. That grows our local businesses. We try to focus on local restaurants. Chains are not out of the question, but again, this is our community, right? And we just had our last one in February, which is our biggest one yet. Over here at 310, we had over 30 people easily attend that event. We had Marissa Sandlin speak, which was amazing. And so, as I said, there are specific challenges that individuals at various stages in their transition, as well as in their career and their life, they face. And so this group is really there to help address some of those challenges. And each T-Network event, we try to raise up one of these topics. The event itself, we meet the last Wednesday of every month from 6 to 8 p.m. The venue does change, so I'm trying to get people on, start a mailing list, get people so we can, we're working on how to get that word out in terms of where we meet each time, because I really am trying to spread the love across Orlando. But if you're interested, obviously, in more information on what we're doing, how we're doing it, how to get involved, want to be a speaker or just participate, please make sure you see me or get information at the back. But I want to close out on talking to you about this today and open up for any questions if people are allowed to ask questions. But I want to share a note that I received from one of the attendees after one of our first events. And I did get permission to share this. But she sent me this. She said, "Thanks for putting together a great event last night. I felt very comfortable there and met some wonderful people too, yourself included. I've only been going outside of my home since July 5th. I'm slowly testing the waters. Events like yours help me gain my confidence that I can do this. And I look forward to attending the next meeting. Thank you again, Josie." So that's all I have. But I thank you very much for letting me come in and talk about this. Like I said, we're young, we're growing. I hope more information, hopefully more excitement the next time Gina lets me speak. But I'm definitely open to any questions if you have any. I know I probably didn't take the full 15, so 2. I can take 2 questions, she said, if anybody has any. Nope. Yes?
Is there a Facebook page for Teen Network, or is that just a mailing list?
There's a mailing list right now. I create Facebook events when we have, and I do need to create a Facebook group or a page that's open to all, so that is going to be coming. Right now, that's why I keep the business cards at the back with the information. We had a page on MBA, and that I went to go check on, and because that was one of the things I was going to share, and it's not showing up, and I think that's because they did a bunch of revamping to the website. So we did have a website, but in lieu of that, we're going to look to create something else. So yeah, so I apologize we don't have a good presence, virtual presence yet. But all right, well, thank you.
You know, that's so great to see. And one of the common denominators that we found early when I was president of the MBA was the corporate climate and the business communities. You know, the Fortune 500 companies like Lockheed Martin and Wells Fargo, where I transitioned on the job, we found a common denominator with those major corporations who supported inclusion and diversity. And through that, we were able to better relate to elected officials and move, if you will, the transgender agenda forward. But it's a very powerful message when you have Fortune 500 companies that walk the walk and talk the talk and support Jennifer in what she's doing that affects so many people. You know, the ripple effect that can come from the Lockheed Martin Pride Group to the MBA to the T Network and on, that's what it's all about. And Shabara talked about, you know, if not now, when, and if not us, who? That's who. So, great stuff. And we're off to a great start. All right, our next speaker, I'm excited to introduce you to the executive director of our center in Orlando, Mr. Terry DeCarlo. Terry.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. As Gina said, I'm Terry DeCarlo. I'm the new executive director over the center. I've only been there about 4 months. And we're over on Mills Avenue. We host several transgender groups over there. If you've been over and you've taken a look, we're about to do a brand new building. They're tearing the old building out and putting a new building in, so we're going to have actually even more space that we can hold larger and bigger groups and get more into the fight like we want to. You know, we're a staunch supporter. I've written something down here because, and I didn't want to go too much into the center. You know what the center is. You know what we do. But my personal in the transgender movement goes back many, many years. And does anybody here know the name Marsha P. Johnson? No. No. I see one. Yeah, I see one on the back. Marsha Johnson, Marsha P. Johnson, you have to put the P in there, otherwise she's going to look down and hit me, was a trans woman who became an important face of the LGBT community. She feared no judgment or harassment and ridicule and dressing as living as a woman. The hardships of transgender individual were nothing new to Marsha, who was also a long-time homeless. Born Malcolm Michaels, Marsha legally changed her name to Marsha P. Johnson in 1966 when she moved from New Jersey to Greenwich Village. When people would ask her what the middle initial P stood for, she replied, "Pay it no mind." She always said this was intended to be an answer to a question so many had on their minds as to whether she was male or female, which was a question she really hated. Marcia lived in New York City's Greenwich Village and was devoted to the transgender community. Acceptance was not always easy to come by back then, even living into one of the largest cities in the United States, but Marcia pushed through it. On the morning of June 28, 1969, police in Greenwich Village raided a known gay bar, the Stonewall Inn, where Marcia P. Johnson was that night. Several day riot broke out. It had been claimed that Marcia was the person who started the riots by finally having enough and throwing her high heel at a policeman, and it missed and went through the window of the bar. She was then also observed later on taking a cinder block and dropping it on a police car. You just didn't mess with Marcia. Along with her fellow transgender activist and friend Sylvia Rivera, Marcia stepped up to start the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries. They were able to organize homeless and runaway transgender individuals to help build a community where they lived together. Another activist group Marcia became part of after the Stonewall riots was the Gay Liberation Front. Along with Starr and GLF, Marcia posed for a collection of Andy Warhol paintings and photographs called Ladies and Gentlemen. It was the title of Warhol's works that Marcia posed for in 1975. She wanted to do that because she thought she'd be seen by millions, what she wanted most, to display her beauty and her femininity. On Saturday night, July 5th, 1992, I, little homosexual, was walking down Christopher Street, and I had known Marcia for quite a while, and just walking down Christopher Street, and this voice bellowed down the street, "Darling, where have you been all my life? I've missed you." That night, Marcia and I sat down and talked for hours before finally giving kisses to each other and saying goodnight, and as the night ended, me watching her sashay down Christopher Street. I loved that woman. The next morning, July 6, 1992, her body was found floating in the Hudson River. Police investigators ruled her death as a suicide, but we knew Marcia would never commit suicide. There was no criminal investigation into the death of Marcia P. Johnson. To quote punk and new wave innovator Richard Hell, if you just amass the courage that is necessary, you can completely reinvent yourself. You can be your own hero, and once everybody is their own hero, then everybody is going to be able to communicate with each other on a real basis rather than a hand-me-down set of societal standards. People like Marcia P. Johnson made it possible for all of us to live our lives authentically, to express ourselves truthfully rather than lie based on archaic and restrictive social norms. Today, Marcia's legacy lives on within the GLBT community and beyond, and as you can see, the fight for transgender rights has been going on way too long. In the words of my favorite Marcia P. Johnson, screw these people. I am who I am, and their words or actions cannot hurt me. I just pay it no mind. Now let's get over this crap in their simple minds and get on with the real work that needs getting done. That's my Marcia P. Johnson. That's my story. That's how I got involved in the transgender movement, meeting this incredible, incredible person. The center is dedicated to the transgender community, the fight. Whatever we can do, we will be at the forefront. You call on us, we will be there. And I thank you.
Any questions for Terry? We will have a break, so if you want to, catch up with these great folks one-on-one, you can certainly do that as well.
And I had to write that down so I could get it out.
Well, it was beautiful. Thank you. My good friend Dexter recently, as you might have seen in Facebook, I don't know how he did it, but he broke his foot, or is that it? He's in a cast. Anyway, he was in so much pain that he was not able to be with us today. But from the Zebra Coalition, someone who does a great deal of work there and is doing so much good work for the transgender community. I'm very pleased to present to you Brett Berlone, the clinical manager of the Zebra Coalition.
Thank you, Gina. With me as well is our wonderful new case manager, Malia Becerra-Williams. So we are stepping in for Dexter, so we're not the regular spokespeople of Zebra. So we will work together to share what Zebra wants to share for our day today. So thank you. Dexter is unfortunately trying out new footwear. So I checked it out this morning. Looks uncomfortable. But so far this year, the transgender community has seen a mind-boggling amount of violence and loss. Whether it's names that were mentioned, some of the names mentioned before, whether it's Penny Proud, Brie Golick, Taha De Jesus, Yasmin Bash Payne, Ty Underwood, Lamaya Beard, or Lamar Edwards, we have seen an alarming and fatal epidemic of violence against transgender and gender nonconforming women, specifically transgender women of color in the United States. Among all the loss, it is Leila Alcorn's case and others like her that really can't get out of our heads. It's such a tragedy to see these stories. Among all the Malia.
So it's very apparent that our transgender and gender nonconforming youth are getting lost in this movement for transgender rights. And that can be seen through the high amount of suicides and homicides specific to our youth. There is a larger educational point that needs to be said loud and clear for the benefit of transgender and gender, nonconforming youth and their families. That message is simple. For transgender youth, access to supportive health care services and resources saves lives. At Zebra Coalition, our multidisciplinary team is committed to working with gender nonconforming and transgender youth and their families. In many of these instances, individuals are not familiar with resources and services to support them within the community and options related to medical therapies and interventions, which is why events like this are great so that we can all become educated on what's out there. The beautiful thing about Zebra Coalition is that we understand that transitioning looks different for every youth. We don't sit there and tell them, this is how you have to transition, this is what it has to look like. We allow them to be empowered and to state what they want from us, what they want in terms of transgender resources, if any at all. Youth across Central Florida come to Zebra Coalition because our team and coalition partners provide culturally competent and affirming mental health counseling, case management, support groups, as well as support for transition needs, such as hormone blocking and hormone replacement therapy. Kind of as a side note to that, we are seeing an all-time high of transgender clients currently. We are currently at 18% of our youth who identify as non-binary or as transgender who do not fit with the cisgender binary roles. Some other things that we provide outside of HRT assistance are letters of support showing that we fully support our youth's gender identity and they have the right to identify how they want, whether that's in the workplace or school or whatnot. Within the last month, we've provided 2 of these letters, which is not typically seen in our community. So these youth are finding they need to come to Zebra Coalition in order to have a letter that states, this person wants to be called this and you should refer to it because that's best practices within our community.
We also work with parents and families of children that do not initially support the intervention Zebra takes. This is often due to the denial about children's authentic gender identity, a lack of education about safety of the potential medical interventions, or deeply rooted personal, religious, or cultural objection. In the overwhelming majority of these cases, but certainly not all, our team can effectively work with families and individuals to find a common path moving forward, or at the very least find a path to ensure the safety and the well-being of the child or the adolescent. We have taken steps and we continue to do it right now seasonally. We do work with parents. We offered, which is going to come back real soon, Beyond Pink and Blue, which is specifically for support to parents of transgender youth. It's like a psychoeducation series, but we hope to grow it into a support as well.
To go along with that, we are actually about to launch a transgender youth support group specific to youth who are receiving our services. It's a focus group in order for them to build community and to figure out what we as Zebra need to start providing more of and how we can best assist them. It'll allow youth to be empowered and to really be able to tailor our services to fit their needs. Something that we do want to touch on is homelessness. Homelessness is also a critical issue for transgender people. 1 in 5 transgender individuals have experienced homelessness at some point in their lives. Unfortunately, social service and homeless shelters that work with this population often fail to culturally and appropriately serve transgender homeless people, including denying them shelter based on their gender identity. Many of our youth who come to Zebra tell us that they've gone to other shelters or services and they had to leave because they were forced to, identify in the way that they don't identify as. A lot of our youth have been inappropriately housed due to having to be misgendered, and they are feeling like the other services are failing to address co-occurring issues facing transgender homeless adults and youth. Zebra Coalition offers the only residential program in the Central Florida area that can provide appropriate housing options for transgender youth experiencing homelessness. We are able to meet the specialized housing needs of gender nonconforming and transgender youth, where we make room assignments and housing decisions based on the well-being of the individual youth versus sex-segregated housing.
All right. While it remains true that too many transgender youth are the victims of hate crimes and too many become homeless or contemplate suicide, this spectrum of dysfunction does not capture the strength, perseverance, pride, and resilience that, in my opinion, more accurately capture the spirit of the young transgender people of our team sees each day and every day. We have wonderful, wonderful youth participating with us and showing us that there is hope. For many individuals, access to an organization like the Zebra Coalition or access to an organization like Zebra Coalition that cares for gender nonconforming youth could literally be a lifeline to the future as their authentic selves. Thank you very much. Any questions for us? Please.
My name is Terry. I actually come from Volusia County. Up there we have Halifax Urban Ministries. They're very involved in homeless shelters. Right now they're trying to build a homeless shelter on the ISB where they want to, and they've been working very hard. They've been talking with myself and a group of people that I kind of represent there on building this from the ground up to be transgender friendly, including such things as when people come to the shelter, helping them get proper IDs, counseling, name changes as necessary to incorporate their real gender identity. Do you know of anyone else around that are doing similar work, or is it this very unique to us?
I would say personally, I do not know of anyone else. I would say it's an initiative that's occurring now that people are starting to think. The most advanced thinkers seem to be college campuses when it comes to how to design and make comfortable opportunities. But in the homeless shelters, I have not seen significant thought. It seems that the most common option is for an isolated room, which isolation can cause its own issues. So I'm hoping to hear more thinking of that nature and building of concepts. Yeah, please check in with me. I brought our information. Gina.
Tell everyone your age group, your age bracket.
Yeah, we specifically work with 13 to 24 LGBT. We use plus to make sure we're inclusive to all youth. And our housing age has, due to our parameters, is 18 to 24. Thank you, Christy. Any other questions for us?
How would you characterize the increase in the work I do and talking to school boards? We're seeing a market increase of young people that are coming out and are transitioning at younger and younger age. Can you kind of touch on that as far as how you see? Can you quantify that in any fashion?
Do you have a thought on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say as a whole, right now we have a high increase of 18 to 20 that's seeing us, and we're attributing that to word of mouth. I will have 5 intakes between last week and this week, all of them for transgender needs, specific to HRT and transitioning. So we're finding word of mouth is huge. In terms of our younger population, so 13 to 17, we're finding that they are going on Google. They're hearing different things. They're hearing friends who are, gender queer or who don't identify, with the body that they have is how they're framing it right now. And so now they're starting to try to explore that and come out to family. So I think it has to do with word of mouth in addition to some of the school support systems and GSAs and having that sense of community.
Yeah, and to add, I would definitely say there's visibility more than ever through media, through social media. I mean, I accidentally come across content for the transgender communities, without looking for it. So that means it's a lot more present.
Any other questions? Great. Thank you all so
Thank
much.
you.
Okay, our next group to be speaking to you is PFLAG, and I'm very pleased to say that the president of PFLAG, Glenn Carlson, is here sitting up front, and speaking for PFLAG today will be our good friend Pat Padilla. So Pat, welcome to the microphone.
Always good to see you.
Thanks for being here.
Oh my gosh, it's so exciting. And Gina, I cannot believe you have made this happen. Thank you. It's absolutely wonderful. Oh, how many of you are familiar with PFLAG? Well, we do have some people who are not, and that's understandable. I have many people from the LGBT community, when I ask them that, they don't even know what that is. PFLAG's kind of a grassroots organization that was formed by parents of lesbian and gays back around 1973. So PFLAG's been around quite a while. We've got about 200,000 members and about 500 chapters across the U.S. And we actually have chapters now in some other countries. The UK has them, Puerto Rico, which is kind of almost the U.S., I consider sometime, but even Argentina and Mexico. And Australia has quite a, and they have like 5 different PFLAG chapters in different cities, so spread around quite a bit. But PFLAG was formed by parents usually, but it's parents, family, and friends, and we support the gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender community. When PFLAG started back in 1973, transgender was not that well known at that time, but in 1998, PFLAG started supporting the trans community, and PFLAG does not support anything that transgender is not included. And that has led to quite a few things right here in Orlando that I'll talk to you about just a little bit later. We have a PFLAG chapter here in Orlando, and the question I love to ask on this one is, how long has PFLAG been meeting here in Orlando in the Deep South? We have actually been here 27 years, and we meet, it's almost a block and a half from here, at the First United Methodist Church, and we have been meeting there all that time. There was one year when they first formed that they met at some center up on Mark Street, but just for 1 year while they were getting everything going at that time. But we have no affiliation with any church or the Methodist Church or any other religious organization or anything like that. And so it has been here that long, though, which sometimes it absolutely amazes me that PFLAG has been here in Orlando all of those years. I have been a member of PFLAG for about 15 years. I actually became involved with PFLAG. I am an ally. I became involved because of a coworker. And 15 years ago, working with him and found out that he was gay, and honest to goodness, believe it or not, that was the first person that I was aware of who was gay that I knew of, okay? I've certainly probably had people around my life all that time, but just was not aware. And it opened up a whole world to me that I was not aware of. Saw a little thing in the Orlando Sentinel about PFLAG soon after that, and went to PFLAG just to understand a little more of what he was going through. He was open at work, out at work and with his family, but I knew that there was still a lot of things going on. And so that's how I became involved with PFLAG, just because of the coworker. We have noticed in PFLAG over the last 4 or 5 years, we have had transgender families coming to us before, but in the last 4 or 5 years, we actually now have more transgender families coming than gay and lesbian, which is really something. And I think we're kind of hearing a trend here with other speakers that we've had here today. And it's just amazing because about 4 or 5 years ago, we had a mother come to us, actually a counselor called PFLAG and wanted to know, you know, if we had resources for a family that had a transgender child. And we started working with this family. The child was 6 years old at that time, and having problems at school because the school was trying to do what they needed to do, but if there was a substitute teacher or something else, and then you have the problem that the legal name, he absolutely identified as a boy, but everything, you know, all the legal papers and everything was his female name and everything. So they had come and we'd worked with them quite a bit, and they were having these problems with the school, and I actually knew, this was in Volusia County, and actually knew someone from the ACLU that I had worked with in other things, and kind of put them in touch with each other, and they passed an anti-bullying policy to include transgender in Volusia County because of this child. They still do not have the non-discrimination policy in Volusia County that I know that Gina has really been working with there, but just because of this one child that happened. We have quite a few others who have come. We have one now that is 4.5 years old, that the parents have come to us, and the mother is a nurse. The father is very well educated. Oh, hey there, man. Yeah, the mom is right there. Oh, my goodness. And the mother, she is a nurse, and what she said is possibly transgender, but absolutely identifies as a girl. Yes, exactly, even at 4.5. So all different ages. We've had quite a few, but a couple of them that have come through that have been amazing, that we've watched them transition and everything going on for 4 or 5 years. One came to us, actually a Hispanic family, and you know, even with the difference with the culture and everything, to watch this taking place with the family and the child, and female to male also. He is finished up high school at Valencia, on the president's list at Valencia, just so successful and so happy. The mother was actually here. We had an Orlando Youth Empowerment Summit here a couple of weeks ago, and the mother was here with him as he was speaking on one of the panels, and she was right there to support him and adding, you know, helping to answer questions and everything. We have another one who is female to male also. Parents are on the board of PFLAG, and just, I mean, he is just amazing. He is now driving the monorail at Disney. So, and we've watched them from, you know, when they were 13, 14 years old, as now they're in their adulthood and they're so successful. And it's just wonderful to see that they've had the parents to back them. Where you get the concern is so many things like they're noticing at Zebra and all are the ones who are homeless and different things because they do not have that parental support. But at PFLAG, because we have so many other parents that they can come and they can share stories, share resources, and it really helps to make such a difference in so many different lives. And we do have them. We've had them from Orange County, Lake County, Osceola County, Polk County, Orange, Seminole, quite a few from Lake County. I know one who actually came to us, and this has probably been, 8 or 9 years ago, 14 years old, several very serious suicide attempts at that time, even when I'm calling back and forth with the mother and everything. She was back in the hospital because of that. She's probably 22 right now. She had to drop out of high school in Lake County because she was so bullied and harassed while she was in school there and what she went through. But did get her GED, and I know even when she was doing that out at Seminole, her mother couldn't get her one day, and she calls me to see if I could run out to the school to pick her up and bring her home, and just everybody working to make this happen. She has actually taught herself Mandarin Chinese to speak, write, and French. It's just amazing, the things that have happened with so many of these ones, and just to watch them, it's incredible. It's a good feeling for sure. We really work with them at a grassroots level. And so, working just with networking, with someone gets in touch with us that they need a resource. We had a PFLAG family that was moving to Orlando from Connecticut, and they had a 10-year-old transgender child, and they called and wanted to know where is the best school system, where can we get in to be protected. They let us know which school it was going to be. So, we told them Orange County is absolutely in the Central Florida area right now where the most protections are in there. And when they got here, we called the school, made sure, got a contact there. I've even had ones I've followed from, I went to a TSA diversity event at the airport one time, and someone there told me that they had someone in the group that wanted to talk to me, and she had a transgender child that had actually had a suicide attempt the week before. And the only reason the child failed at 15 years old is because the rope broke. But the rope mark was around the neck. And so, really working with that family along. And then they moved into Orange County. And I had already told her, because they were thinking about moving to Orange County. And I said, well, when you do, let me know. And I was able to call. She called me, let me know exactly the school they were going to be moving into. I called the school, and it was like a week before school was starting, and it was the GSA facilitator, and she answered the phone. I know the moon and stars were aligned. And she said, don't worry about it. I will take care of this, and we'll make sure that everything was going on. So it's just networking constantly with the school systems, with the counselors, with all the different organizations, just, whatever it takes to be able to help out these families. Let me make sure I am where I am. The majority we are seeing, and I don't know why, in PFLAG are female to male, which is kind of a little different too than what you would usually think. But almost all of them that we've had come through are female to male. Many may not come to the meetings, but we provide the resources on the outside, and a lot of them are communicating via email or on the telephone or something like that. The ones that do come to the meetings, well, then they're there, then they can share information there also. PFLAG actually educated me, and I think that, of course, I didn't even know anyone that was gay, supposedly, 15 years ago, and certainly nothing with the transgender community, but where PFLAG doesn't support anything that trans is not included, I really became educated on transgender. And I'm on the Orlando Anti-Discrimination Ordinance Committee, and back in, gosh, how many years ago when they passed Chapter 57 here for the city, for the Human Rights Ordinance, it did not include transgender. And after that, I started thinking, I'm with PFLAG, and if they don't include transgender, I can't be involved with this. So I went to the committee and told them that, and sent them all the information from PFLAG National on transgender and everything, and they really didn't want to listen to me. And I went out and I talked to quite a few movers and shakers in the community here in Orlando, and I mean big guys, talking to them about this, and still nothing. And so Dr. Catherine Norsworthy from Rollins College and Gina, her wife, came to PFLAG one time as speakers. And it was about that time, and I had mentioned to PFLAG, said that I was having this problem, this, that, and the other. And she came up afterwards and told me that we need to do something about this. She was on the committee also. So she and Lisa Tillman went back, they're both professors at Rollins, went back and to the committee and brought this up, and I was told that it almost blew the Orlando Anti-Discrimination Ordinance Committee apart, but it stuck. And so transgender has been included since then when they passed the domestic partner registry for the city and the county, and also when they passed the human rights ordinance for the county. And then Gina had to come back and clean up here with the city, which was not much problem at all a couple of months ago, to get transgender added to the city. So all of that's been taken care of.
Well, I wasn't alone in doing it. I wasn't alone in doing it.
It takes a village, honest to goodness, for any of this. It takes a village. I'm so glad to hear the person that's here from Lockheed Martin. Yes, because I work for Symantec, and also I kind of carried my transgender education from PFLAG over there too. 8 years ago, PFLAG was not even on the Human Rights Campaign HRC's radar. And I brought that up to them. And I also told them that if we do not, because I'd already gone out and looked at the diversity categories and gender identity and expression was not there. So I went to the powers that be and told them that we really need to do that. I said, Microsoft's there, Yahoo, and I don't know, Hewlett-Packard, and Tech Data, a Fortune 500 company right here in Clearwater, Florida, is 100% with HRC, one of our huge distributors, and we're not even on their radar. Well, they took that and jumped. And 18 months later, they included transgender, and we've been 100% with HRC ever since. And that wasn't that difficult. You know, it was just bringing it up, and it all goes back to my education from PFLAG. If I hadn't have had that, that wouldn't even have happened. Then I go to Out and Equal. This is a real quick story because someone else had mentioned Out and Equal. I go to Out and Equal, their national meeting in San Francisco, and I think someone else was saying that they'd been there also. Out and Equal is the organization for all the corporate employee resource groups, the LGBT groups, and I'm there. And I have someone that really works a lot with me in Symantec who is transgender. And so the first person I run into is Gina with 3,000 people there in the morning. And I asked her, I said, which sessions are you going to? She says, well, this, that, and the other, but right now I'm going to this special transgender thing that they had before. And I said, well, Cass would probably like to go with you to that. And so off they go, and at lunch she comes back and she says, Pat, I was wondering why you were sending that gay male with me. She had no idea that he was transgender, which was really something else. The Cass really said that he took that as a compliment. Even with that, with Symantec also talking about internationally and why it's so important to have transgender included, we had the CEO of Symantec sent out a notice or something in June, year before last, and I get an email, I get a call at 7:30 in the morning, and I could tell when I picked up my phone it was 4:04. I knew it was coming in from the UK, and so I answered the phone, and it's Jennifer, and she says, Pat, I just want to tell you I didn't see the CEO's message that went out a week before until yesterday because I have been deployed in Afghanistan. She was in the UK reserves, and she said it meant so much to her because she's transgender and had transitioned on the job at Symantec because all of that had been arranged so that transgender could be included, and she had transitioned in the UK reserves. So just little things can make such a big difference. I think I covered it, I hope. Good lands. I think I have, okay? I do appreciate, and I'm sorry for rambling along here real quick. I've had some things happening to me today that's got me kind of a little kaflooey, but anyways, I can't tell you how much I appreciate being here and sharing about PFLAG, because if you know of anyone that could, use our resources or anything, please send them our way. There's quite a few PFLAGs around in Polk County. There's one in Tampa, and we all work together on everything. We actually invite them for Pride to come over and march with us in the parade because sometimes they don't have, groups there and have an opportunity to do that. So we are here and available for anyone who needs us. Thank you.
Questions for Pat?
Yes.
Comment. You also have great ally training, which I was not aware of until Lockheed actually had PFLAG come out to one of our last LGBT leadership forums, and PFLAG did an entire session showing us their ally, like the whole process allies go through, coming out process of being an ally, what go hiding and stuff like that. And so it was just to mention that we really like your ally material, and that's something that this group might be interested in as well. So if they're not aware to check it out.
Yeah, Yeah, thank you. And even corporations, PFLAG National will come and actually do that training too, but even the local PFLAGs can do that too. Wonderful.
Pat, when you have, say, parents come to you, what are their needs? What are you finding is like maybe the top three, most pervasive needs that parents have in dealing with transgender youth?
They feel like they're the only ones. My gosh, they're the only ones. And being able to come to a meeting and talk and meet other parents that are going through this journey also, I think it really makes such a big difference that they know that they're not alone. It's one of the biggest things.
Good deal.
Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah. What do you do when you have a parent that doesn't speak the language? Is there someone there to help them out with that, or whether it's Spanish or?
Claro que sí. Yo hablo español también, entonces con mucho gusto. We do. We have quite a few people who come. We've actually had people with trans children from Colombia, from Argentina, from Europe, and I'm missing one, Argentina, Colombia, and the ones from Puerto Rico who are very, very active, yes. But we do have people who speak Spanish, and so especially for that, because that's the main language here. And that's a very good question, right? Because we've even had, Zebra has sent ones to us who speak Spanish. And so we work so close to all them. All these organizations, we're always sharing back and forth.
Good deal.
Good deal.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Once again, I hope the common thread that we're seeing from this and hearing from these wonderful speakers is the connectivity, where we have resources, where we have people in place who are supporting the transgender community, from our youth to middle-aged people like me, but also where we have gaps. That's when we walk out of here, the two things that I hope we capture is where we have commonality, where we have the resources in place, but also where are the gaps and where can we move forward to improve on those gaps and make sure those resources are covered for the transgender community of all ages. With that in mind, our next speaker is from an organization that you've heard a great deal about today already. I was fortunate this last year to attend the Out and Equal conference in San Francisco, and it was an amazing experience. And here, representing our new Out and Equal Greater Central Florida affiliate of Out and Equal, Miss Andrea Hayes.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Gina, for the invite. It's good to see some familiar faces and also some new faces, so I hope to get a chance before we leave today to meet those of you that I haven't had a chance to talk to yet. A couple months ago, when Gina reached out to all of us and asking us to come out and speak, I jumped. I think I said yes, and then I reread to see what I agreed to. But when I immediately saw the topic and that Gina was organizing this, I knew that it was something that I wanted to make sure that I was associated with. First, before I move on, know that I've been quite moved just even this afternoon listening to some of you share your personal stories and your journey, and as we've been networking and then hearing about all these other corporations, and that what I've been sitting there thinking is just how we continue to tie in. And so I just want to give you thanks again for bringing all these organizations together, because we don't necessarily mean to work in our silos. We try not to. Sometimes it does happen, but that there is overlap here and that there is a purpose, and that for all these organizations to exist is fantastic. But then when we can come together and align to provide resources and assistance to our community is where we really show our light good there. That makes me feel better, like I'm not leaning down. First, I'd like to just introduce myself for those that don't know me. I am a native Floridian, and I love that. I am from St. Petersburg, And I had the great fortune of living on the beaches and going to college and going to the beach before and after college and after work. And now I see that that was a little bit of a spoiled life, even though the beach just isn't too far. But I didn't, as you can see, move too far from home. I was born and raised with a single mom, and I was the only child. And mom had some struggles growing up, and that so I was sitting here thinking, I was recalling some of my own experiences as a child, and as to who I was, and just to share a little bit with you is that I believe for me, as I identify as a lesbian, as a gay woman, but that even I've been sitting here even thinking, as I've been hearing a few of you share your stories, that there were definite times growing up where I saw the differences of between the toys that I really liked to play with and what some of my girlfriends were doing versus what the boys were doing, and that I really would prefer to be out with the guys hitting the football and the soccer, and you know, I gave Barbie a really short haircut, and and whether my mom picked up on that, who knows, but that, you know, my mom was great to allow me to be myself and, you know, enjoy childhood and to embrace who I was. I probably ran her through, you know, life just like we all did for our poor moms, right? So what I want to share, though, is that a little over 16 years ago, I moved to Orlando. And, you know, again, like I said, I love the state, so there was really no reason for me to leave too far. But that I wanted to expand a little bit about who I was. I had already identified as far as my sexuality, and that I was a gay woman, but that I really wasn't quite sure what that meant. And who was that? You know, I was in the exploratory age, and I wanted to go to a place that no one had known me before, and a place that I knew, or at least thought that I would be comfortable as to who I was. And I chose Walt Disney World as my employer because when I had gone there as a guest, time and time again, and what we know of the Disney companies being inclusive and embrace, and that I knew people who had worked there and who had currently worked there, and I thought, let's give that a try. And I started there. Within the first few months, I thought, I've arrived. This is where I need to be. And as I grew up in the company, a great opportunity as I worked for a very inclusive company. And I'll share that my own company has gone through its own progression in the past 16 years, as many other companies have. But what I am proud to say is that my current employer currently leads that pace with many other Fortune 500 and 1,000 companies, as we've heard a few stories here this morning, or this afternoon, excuse me. Where I'd say I took a greater leap in is about halfway through my career, so about 8 years ago, through my service in the community and volunteering, I learned of this cool group. It was an employee resource group, and it was a bunch of cast members, as we call ourselves over there. And they were representing the LGBT community within the employee base, but they were out volunteering in the community. And I was with them, and I didn't even realize what was going on. And as I continued to learn about what these employee resource groups were and all about, and that they actually had meetings sometimes on and off property, and about the differences that they were making in the workplace and out in the community, I thought, okay, this is pretty cool. I need to learn a little bit more about this. And so I got attached to the group, became part of the leader of the group, and for a couple of years, and then ended up being the president of the organization out there at Walt Disney World, Pride Diversity Resource Group. Jennifer talked about Lockheed Martins, and Pat talked about Symantec as well. Is that then another light kind of went on for me, was being able to see the power of an influence of people. We've heard a lot of you all speak already today about being champions for one another, but that internally, what employees can do for their employers. And that while I have stood here and said how proud I am of my company that I currently work for, that there's been a progression through that. And I will absolutely have to say that the company I work for, and I bet a few of you might say the same for yours, is that the reason that bar keeps getting pushed or things keep getting better and better is because the employees have brought it to life to their leaders, to their executives, and have challenged the status quo. And that, yes, while I do work for a very large company, and I say sometimes we are the community because we are out and about in these 5, sometimes 6 central counties, but that there is great impact that employees can do within their corporation, and that large corporations do have a spot in this, and that they have a power of influence, and that I know there are things afoot currently in the works. We have House bills moving forward. Equality Florida actually has a board representative of Fortune 500 corporations that are on board for equality in the workplace and thinking about policies, procedures, health care benefits. I love about the example about the health care and at the dentist office and these boxes that you have to check off. And that sometimes the way to influence government or influence other policies and procedures outside of what might be the government are these large organizations, and sometimes they're corporations. And so I'll go back now. What these employee resource groups can and have the possibility of doing is bringing these concerns to light. And usually it is through the human resources organization that they report into. This is all a volunteer position. So imagine people working 40, 50, sometimes 60 hours a week, but going ahead and giving another 10 to 20 hours a week voluntarily to serve on these boards, representing their community base of their employees or understanding what is happening in the greater community in the surrounding geographical area of these corporations. And so one thing I'd like to tie in, and I know Joe Saunders will just love this because I'm going to give him a good plug, and his organization too, is employee resource groups are needed, specifically an LGBT employee resource group is needed for a Fortune 1000, mostly the 500s and ups, to get 100% on the Human Rights Campaign Corporate Equality Index. Know that that is still very much something that they want and that they really need to have to be an employer of choice. And so the tie-in here, it's good that someone's kind of holding these things accountable. There are many other metrics that the HRC CEI has, but to have Fortune 500 companies have to have an LGBT employee resource group, an acting one. So it's not just a check on the box, but you actually have to prove that something's happening, people are meeting, that there's actually work going afoot, helps these companies rise above and be known as one of the top employers of choice. It also is a way that when we think about transgender healthcare benefits and opportunities being brought that to light, and that there's still opportunity for making sure that everybody understands the progress in which hiring people on board. I don't know if about how long it's been since maybe some of you all have changed into new jobs, but just think about some of those steps, and that usually the onboarding and training of an employee could sometimes take, at the minimum, I think, a week, but it could take up to 3 to 4 weeks or even longer, depending on the technical training that's going on. And imagine all the people that someone has to meet, and what is the appropriate area for work, and then most specifically, and I think what I'd love to just point out is, what restroom is someone supposed to be using while they're working, and what is appropriate for them and where to go. What I do love to see sometimes is when publicly or outside available for the public or just for employees when there's non-gendered. So it's just open place for people to go in, whether it's just one stall or many, but that, that's something that I personally am a fan of because it just makes it much more comfortable. But in the realm of what we're talking about today is that I'm representing Out and Equal. It is a new chapter here in Orlando, and it's an affiliate of the organization that resides out in California, based in San Francisco. It's been in existence since 1996. Celeste Berry is the CEO and founder. She's remained in that role this entire time. And that their mission is for equality in the workplace, inclusion, and supporting LGBT employee resource groups. So as I shared, these Fortune 500s have to have it if they're going to get 100% of the CEI, and they can't just check the box. Well, to get people to volunteer another 10 to 20 hours a week, you can imagine it's not so easy. So being able to have the structure together as to what their purpose, their plan, and what it is that they can do. can help, as I said, understand the policies and procedures of what's going on internally, be able to share best practices or their own perspective and what they've gone through. Know that I have done that for my employer quite a few times, that sometimes we would source special groups to come in and help our HR division better understand current climate of what was happening, internal and external candidates. These employee resource groups also have the ability of connecting back out to corporations and other nonprofits. When you think about volunteering, Fortune 500 companies, actually 1,000, Fortune 1000s, or really a lot of us love to give back to the community. And that's a great example of being a good corporate citizen and how they can get out and support organizations like Equality Florida, like Human Rights Campaign, and boy do we love the Zebra Coalition too. And so these employee resource groups can also, in this other third tier, is help companies understand the business aspect. And so if they can better understand, and we'll talk specifically about the LGBT community and how they can market to the LGBT community, how they can drive revenue then back on in, and that's the good old mighty return on investment. And so those are some of the angles that these employee resource group leaders represent for their corporations. It's a great amalgam of individuals, usually represented from all different levels within the organization, as well as different business organizations within the company. And what I'd like to say about the affiliate that we've just started kicked off, I found 11 other leaders along with me, so there's 12 of us, and we actually have 3 of the leaders that serve on the board with me here. Gina is one of them, so is Jennifer, and Marissa serves on the board as well. And that this coming May will be our kickoff, so there'll be more that you all will hear about that, where we're going to host a networking event so you can learn more about Out and Equal and the affiliate here in Orlando, and how we hope to be able to continue to serve, work together as organizations, and expand opportunities to ensure that the greater Orlando community, working community most specifically, is as inclusive as possible. So if we have a moment, I'm happy to take questions, but is there anybody who'd like to ask a question?
Hi, I'm John David. I am a transgender male. I transitioned last year at the age of 45. What I do for a living is I'm a veterinary practice management consultant. I have access to 26,000 vet practices across the country who call me for advice. The word got out that I transitioned. I'm getting calls from all over the country about how do I transit, what role do I take in transitioning this employee. It's the small business sector of America, doesn't have to meet certain benchmarks for inclusion, but just the veterinary industry alone is millions of employees. So with all these other sectors, what would you recommend? I'm trying to reach out and create some sort of standard in certain industries for this as well. To try and equal Fortune 500 standards as well.
Sure. I'll answer it, and then I'm going to give you an email address of ours so you can follow up. We would love to help connect, and we would then use our home chapter in San Francisco's resources, also connecting with your local Chamber of Commerce, which is MBA Orlando, and they'll connect to the National Gay Lesbian Chamber of Commerce. Between those two groups, you'll be able to get enough of conversations and resources to help better understand whether there's current models that you can leverage from, or if there is something more specific that could be developed. But between those two affiliates that are local and then connecting out to the national level, I think that would be helpful. But if you have any other questions, you can send a note to Orlando and then the @ symbol and spell it out. outandequal.org. The word "and" is spelled out, outandequal.org. That's a great example of, how we can work together, but helping to provide, because you're right, to talk a lot about large corporations because they're kind of mandated, but smaller startups and medium-sized aren't held to the same level, but you certainly want to be an inclusive employer.
It is true, but someone that is transgender can actually, if it's not done properly in the front office, it can actually hurt a small businessman financially. I think small businessmen and women, that's fine, but when the bottom line is affected, it's more prevalent in a smaller business than, if they take a chance on someone.
Yeah, I'm sure, and I'm looking around the room, and there's a couple other entrepreneurs in this room that probably have shared some of the similar stories or know of Thank you. Thank you. Oh, one more.
So the next conference for Out and Equal is in Dallas, is that right?
Yes, it's in Dallas this year. Next year it'll be right here, Orlando. It'll be shared on the Walt Disney World property at Swan and Dolphin and Yacht and Beach Club. And that's usually a conference of 3,000 to 4,000, sometimes in the higher end when it's here. It's great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You know, when I do my trainings with corporations and nonprofits and churches and universities, part of what I train on is not only workplace protocols but also personal development. And in making the major step to transition at any stage of your life, I always talk about the personal side of that. It's not all about fitting in the workplace, but it's also about your own personal journey and having those components in place to ensure that your transition is successful as possible. Because as you know, in the transgender community, our suicide rate is alarmingly high at 41% of our entire community who lives this journey attempts suicide. So how can we, cut into that? And a big part of that is having the support of family and friends, having the support of your employer, having self-actualized to where you're strong enough and ready to make this step, but also making sure that you absolutely have a mental health professional in your corner, on your side, guiding you every step of the way. I was very fortunate in my transitioning 8 years ago that I had a wonderful therapist who on many occasions saved my life, and sorry. And he's here today to speak to us. He's very special in my heart. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. David Baker-Hargrove of BHC Assessment and Consulting.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, I didn't really expect that, so I'm kind of like all moved and all nervous and kerfluffled and everything. So, one of the things I think I have to talk about in the work that I do in my company is that my journey kind of started okay, so first of all, I have to say that, that the general out there, they lump us all together in the LGBT plus, and they think that we're all kind of kumbaya and we all kind of get each other. And, and the reality is, of course, as most of you know, is that, the L and the G and the B and the T don't really, there's so many instances where we really don't understand each other. I mean, my goodness, it's hard enough for the gays and the lesbians to get along enough times, let alone when you start to throw in the T into the mix. And so I certainly grew up as a young homosexual psychotherapist. I certainly grew up as a typical cisgendered party boy gay man. I didn't know anything about transgender people, and I think that there was probably a little bit of judgment and cruelty in some of my behavior many years ago. But what happened was so I've been practicing in the Central Florida community for about 20 years. I started in '94. And so in the mid to late 90s, I was a volunteer counselor at the center. And someone came in who wanted to transition and said, oh, I think I'm transgender and I want to transition. And I didn't know anything about what to do or how to help this person. And in 1997, the internet was basically just porn and message boards, right? So there was no way to get any information about anything. The published literature on what it meant to be transgender or how to help someone transition was almost non-existent, at least as far as I knew and could get my hands on. And but you know what? We sat down and we tried to work it out together. And I really kind of found it connected to me in so many ways, because I felt like that it was so cathartic for me to kind of reach out to so many people. And I never really intended to kind of be like the transgender therapist. I didn't really know that was going to be my thing. But I found such a deep connection of people really struggling with who they are. And it was so parallel with my own journey, because along the way, you know, growing up gay now, in a lot of cases, is so much different than growing up, because I'm really old, by the way. And so growing up as a young gay man in the 70s and 80s, it was a lot, the landscape was a lot more hostile. And certainly because as a result of that, I grew up very disconnected from myself. I didn't know who I was, and I was not anchored to my truth. And I find that that's so often the case with people in the transgender community, and I really connected to that because I wanted, in my own journey, as I learned how to become honest with myself and I learned how to become anchored to my truth, I wanted to be able to convey that and teach that to other people. And so I kind of found this kind of this relationship between myself and the transgender community that really worked. And so I just continued onward, and then as the internet started to kind of grow and expand, my name started to get out there and more people started to come to the business, and I actually started BHC Assessment Consulting in 2005. Originally for a much different idea. I had kind of partnered with a school psychologist, and we were going to do psychological testing, which is like horrible, the most boring job ever, and it didn't really last for very long. So when people ask me, well, what does the BHC stand for? Because obviously BH is Baker-Hargrove. And C was the actual other partner's name, and who doesn't exist with the company anymore. And so now I just tell people Charming. So people ask me, so when did you start to see a huge growth in people coming to you about their gender identity and wanting to explore what their gender identity meant to them? And I really put it at 2008. I really started to see an explosion in my practice of more people coming. And that's really about the time that social media really started to take off. Facebook and Twitter and a lot of different forums that were on the internet, and I think it was a lot of YouTube. And so people were really able to start to find that information. And when they were able to find this information, it spoke to them. And then they wanted to seek out someone who they felt that they could trust or have a good relationship with to get them started on this journey. And and I'm very active in WPATH, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. And and it was about that time that even I thought that the standards of care for WPATH were starting to look a little archaic, because our job as mental health professionals at that time was just to make sure that you're not crazy. And so that was kind of our job. And I really thought, I don't know that that's the way that I really want to have that relationship with clients. As one client said to me one time, and I'll never forget it, I can go to some sort of tattoo artist or somebody like that, and I can tattoo my face to make myself look like a reptile, and I can fork my tongue, and I don't have to have a therapist sign off on that. But if I want to undergo medical treatment in order to make my body match my mind, I have to have someone vouch for me that I'm not crazy. And that really struck me as so significant. And so I really wanted to have a different relationship with clients. And so one of the things that we kind of grew into is really about how to set people up for success, because transition itself is a challenge. And I find that so many clients really have spent a certain amount of time disconnected from themselves and really trying to figure out who they are. And, and if I have this situation and I have this experience in my life, can I still look in the mirror and say, yes, I matter? And so that has really been the way that we've developed our model of doing therapy and our way that we relate to the clients. And I think that's why we've continued to grow. So when I stepped down as president of the MBA in 2010, I had a dream. And my dream was that I wanted to build a more comprehensive health center for the LGBT community where people could come and be able to access culturally competent health care. Not just mental health care, but health care. And so I started that, of course, doing what I know, and that's growing BHC into a larger practice. Now for many years it was just me in a room. And now I have three therapists that work with me, and an admin team as well. And we can't keep up with the demand. Probably, and we do a lot of other mental health stuff as well, but probably about a good 65 to 70% of our clients are transgender. And we can't keep up with the demand. Actually, we're all on a waiting list right now. So, and that's really how much I think people in general are willing to break down those societal expectations of gender expectations and really look at themselves and explore who they are. And I think that's a really good thing. And so we continue to grow BHC, but also, you know, I was really such a concern to me, as I'd like to tell people, I've been a nonprofit both personally and professionally my whole entire life. And so I've worked a lot in public mental health, and it was such a big dream of mine to have a nonprofit organization where we could have expanded access, where people who at every economic level could come and access services that they need. And that's when it was April of 2011 that I got the letter from the IRS stating that Two-Spirit Mental Health Services is now an official 501c3 not-for-profit organization, which we have been building slowly and quietly over the years. When we became a Medicare provider, we offer some low-cost counseling to people who are economically disadvantaged. But you know, so when I look to the future, what I see is still my dream to create a health center that has expanded access for people of every economic stratum to be able to access, and not only just mental health, but general practice as well. So, and you know, it's so great. I totally believe in when you are doing what you need to do, when you are aligned with who you are and you live authentically and you believe in your vision for yourself, and you trust in yourself and you anchor yourself to your own truth, the universe works to help you. So not too long ago, and I've never actually, this has been a big secret until today, I had a medical doctor literally fall into my lap, who, well, okay, that's not, I guess when I say literally, I mean figuratively, right? Because she didn't quite fall into my lap, but she did come to my office. She has been studying hormone replacement therapy for about 40 years. She's an excellent, excellent physician, and someone that I am just so excited to know as a person. And she's currently going through her transition year. And our plan is that Two-Spirit Mental Health Services will start providing, probably by the end of the year, primary care and HRT services. And it will be expanded access so that not just people with money will be able to come, and because that's really the big dream of mine, because as we've talked about earlier, so many of the people who are really struggling in the transgender community are people with, who are economically disadvantaged, and they really need the ability to access services and also get the medical treatment that they need. And we have a lot of big plans for Two-Spirit in the future, and I think you all are going to be so amazed. And usually I don't ever, because I think talk is cheap, honestly, and I never usually say anything until it's actually done, but this is actually going to be a done deal, and I'm really excited to share that with you today. So, you know, this is what we've been doing. And so the other future of, make sure I'm not running out of time here. So the other future that I see that I want to make sure that I talk about is that really became clear to me, and it's been actually talked a little bit about today, is helping other people outside of our community understand the need to be culturally competent. And so one of the things that I also do is I want to expand that awareness within the medical community. And I have done that certainly in Central Florida. Some of my clients where I've done education for has been the Orlando VA, which there's such a huge number of transgender vets and that need culturally competent services at the VA. Central Florida Regional Hospital, I also did a seminar for the University of Central Florida's Health Services team. So all of their psychiatrists, nurses, and counselors to be able to raise their level of cultural competence, and also small practices here within the city that might have a greater than normal opportunity to see transgender patients. And then also in professional organizations as well. Last year I was privileged to speak at the American Psychotherapy Association conference in Tucson. And I'm very, very, very big feather in my cap, so that's why I'll end it with a big send-off, that I've been accepted to speak at the American Psychiatric Association conference this year in Toronto, Canada. So to talk to them about working with, yeah, that was huge. So, I mean, and so I'm very excited about that, and I'm going to continue to do that. I mean, I have a big list as far as my travel budget will allow to go to these conferences and speak to people to spread the word about culturally competence and delivering cultural competence services to the transgender community. So I'm going to hit like the Nurse Prax conference and family physicians, and I've got a whole list. So that's what that's kind of what I'm doing in my work with the transgender community, and I'm very honored and pleased to be able to provide that service. So thank you all very much. Okay, awesome. Awesome.
Thank you, Dr. David. You know, one of the LGBT leaders in Central Florida for a long time, and who has not only been so influential at a local level in working on the Orlando Anti-Discrimination Alliance, to being a field director at Equality Florida, to running for the House of Representatives in Tallahassee, and being the first, or one of the first, openly gay legislators in our state's history. I'm so proud to have with us now the Southeast Field Director for the Human Rights Campaign, Mr. Joe Saunders.
Hey everybody, how's it going?
Good.
So right before I came up, one of my dear friends in the back pointed out that I am the only person who has an asterisk on the agenda. Gina, Duncan? Why have I been asterisked?
Well, at the time it was pending confirmation.
Oh, because I'm flaky.
You were traveling.
Oh, well, I've just called out my own flakiness.
Because you're special.
How mortifying, because I'm special. Hey, thank you all so much for being in the room today, and thank you for those of you who have presented already. I'm sorry I haven't been able to be here all day, but I've, in the short time that I have been able to join you, been inspired by the work that's going on, and I hope that you leave today with the sense that the way that the movement is focusing in on and pivoting towards the needs and experiences and challenges of the transgender community, I think is greater than it's ever been. And if I have a message for you today, it's that doubling down comes at an incredibly important time. So as Gina mentioned, I'm 31 years old, but I feel like an old pro in LGBT organizing. I've been doing it since I was a student at the University of Central Florida. To be honest, I was actually in a gay straight alliance when I was in high school. I was the one straight member at the time, but I will still wear that with a little badge of honor because I was doing the work even before I was ready to be fully a part of it. But I, for 10 years, was the field director at Equality Florida and helped to work on some policies and some change here in the state that I'm really proud of. I have been on the front lines in the legislative process and experienced all the insanity and craziness and opportunity that comes with that. And now in this new role at HRC, I'm learning and I'm getting this brand new download and this brand new experience to be able to live at the national level of our movement and really understand in a way that I never have before just how many people out there truly hate us and don't want us to exist, all of us, and our allies, and also how many friends we have. And I think that we're in this really important moment that we have to talk about and say out loud, which is that the opposition, our opposition, has spent so long holding the line on marriage that there were moments in time when it felt like they forgot about the other work that was happening, our work that was happening, the work to pass non-discrimination protections at the local level and even at the state level to ban discrimination against the LGBT community in employment and housing and public accommodations. Some of the most transformational work that's happened to ensure protections for transgender people in Florida and across the country has happened in these local campaigns that Gina and I have been a part of. The work to add gender identity protections to the city of Orlando and to pass a human rights ordinance here in Orange County. There were moments in time when we would have these hearings and the opposition wouldn't even show up. And I think much of that was likely because, like us, bandwidth is limited, and they saw the writing on the wall on marriage. Well, I think the writing is more than on the wall on marriage. We have won dozens and dozens of states, and the Supreme Court announced just recently, I think in mid-April, late April, that one of the first rounds of engagement on finally reconciling the issue of marriage equality in the country has begun to move. And so I think there's a couple of things that are happening there that we have to acknowledge. And one is that the opposition, I believe personally, and this is my opinion, not the opinion of HRC, but just Joe Saunders, that they see that they've lost marriage, that at some level they've lost at a level that is profound in the courts. And so we see across the country a pivot to an attrition strategy that's similar to what we've seen around Roe v. Wade. When we won Roe v. Wade at the Supreme Court level, the immediate strategy in the states and local communities all across the country has been to slowly chip away at it. And that's been happening for 30 years. And I think we can already see the beginnings of what that will look like around marriage equality and LGBT rights through some legislation that we've seen introduced and even passed, which I'll talk about in a second. I think the other dynamic that's important to understand, and this is not necessarily the dynamic in Florida, though it is in parts of Florida, but certainly in other parts of the country, is that marriage equality, because of movement in the courts, has come to states and communities where public opinion, as a majority of people who live in the state, has not fully shifted to support marriage equality and the rights that have been gained by LGBT folks in that state. That in fact, not just the political establishments and the legislatures and the highest levels of power in state government or even local government, it's not just that our opposition exists in those places, but in some of these states like Alabama and Mississippi and Arkansas and Wyoming, places, Texas, places where if marriage doesn't exist, it is on the cusp of existing, that the majority opinion and the political infrastructure that supports and is infused by and is reinforced by that opinion is still struggling with the idea of marriage equality. And so in that moment, in that dynamic, lots of scary things can come together. Lots of attacks get launched. I think one of the challenges we have as a movement is that there are some people who, and it's probably based on where you live and what experience you come from, but there are some people who think, well, we're about to get married. We're going to just put a bow on it. Let's move on. Let's wrap it up. And that is not where we are, and I do not believe that that's where we will be. I think that once we win things, we will be defending them over and over and over again. And there are so many social justice movements we can point to that show that defensive strategies are the new strategies for women, for minority communities, for folks who benefit from the Voting Rights Act, et cetera. But let's just, I know I could go a million different places, but what I want to talk about in the limited time that we have is what we are seeing in this moment right now across the country. And what we're seeing more than anything is the need to be on the defensive in a way that maybe we never have been before. HRC is a national organization. We have millions of members. We have a large, robust field team. My job as the Southern Regional Field Director is to manage field and political and legislative operations, basically the state strategies in states that range from Virginia all the way down to Florida, over to Texas, sweeping up through Oklahoma and Kentucky. It is some of the hardest terrain to be doing this work in right now. And HRC every year tracks anti-LGBT pieces of legislation and pro-LGBT pieces of legislation. There are over 20 states that have introduced bills that would protect the entire LGBT, fully inclusive LGBT community from discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodations. There are a few states where we are hopeful that we may pass those bills, that actually we will continue to see proactive movement. But there are over 60 pieces of legislation filed in state legislatures across the country that are directly attacking our community. It is the largest number we've seen in the last 15 years. It's filed in state legislatures. And what's more scary is that of that 60, we have never in HRC's history seen a potential for passage. We've seen the largest number that have actually got the potential to pass because of the same wave that actually helped me lose my election in November and swept in conservative majorities in many of these southern states and Midwest states have created a perfect storm that's being coupled with this marriage moment and this sense that the far right needs to pivot to something else because they may have lost this moment at the Supreme Court level. So what is it that they're doing to us? What is it that we're seeing? What are the attacks looking like? I'd like to talk about what just holistically and sort of some themes what we're seeing and maybe drill down to what's happening here in Florida. Since some of the worst anti-trans legislation in the country has been filed here in Florida in the House. We've seen bills. I would say that there's really 4 different kinds of bills that we're seeing filed, and it really ranges. These bills can just go all over the map. Some of it is at the whims of really crazy legislators who just have some idea when they wake up in the middle of the night and decide that they want to hate somebody. And then others are cookie cutter, almost ALEC style. You know, it's literally the same language. Sometimes they forget to take the name of the state off as they file the bill. Like that's the kind of stuff that we see sometimes. But we've seen And all of these, I would argue, have direct implications on the transgender community specifically, but certainly the LGBT community as a whole. First of all, we have seen anti-trans bills. Some of the worst and most disgusting things ever articulated in legislation has been filed in this year. In Florida and Texas and South Dakota, we've seen bills that would actually make it illegal for a transgender person to use the restroom, that would create a policing effect where business leaders under the threat of being sued, or even other people who are in a bathroom under the threat of being sued, a transgendered person under the threat of being sued would have to prove that they'd had some kind of surgery or that their license, their gender had been changed on their license. These bills vary in degree, but the idea that somebody could literally, through criminal or civil penalties, under the threat of criminal or civil penalties, block a transgender person from using a restroom or a sex-segregated facility. We've seen that similar idea articulated when it comes to students in school, which is, I mean, they're all gross, but these are the ones that I really am struggling with. Kentucky and Texas have seen bills introduced that would actually make it possible to sue a school that allowed a gender nonconforming or a transgendered student who used the quote-unquote wrong bathroom, that the school, not the student, but the school could be sued for allowing that moment to happen. Think about the impact that would have on bullying policies and implications for that student, and really the climate in a school, that the school would have to spend money to have someone stand in front of a door and make sure they're sure that in front of bathrooms, gender nonconforming students were not using those restrooms. We've seen things like state funding, blocks to block state funding in South Carolina from being used for transgendered folks who are in prison or in public facilities who are getting health care from the state and are required continual hormonal therapy or are in some part of their medical transition, seeing a block and a stoppage to that. So there's a lot of crazy anti-trans stuff that has been filed. I want to say really clearly that a lot of this is already dying. So this is getting dark. Let me lighten it up a little bit. It is scary and it's dark, but already because of the work that's happening at the state level and through organizations like HRC, many of this has died. The Oklahoma bill has died. The Kentucky bill has died. We've stopped it. Even if it's moved, we stopped it from becoming law. But there are new bills that are being filed even as we speak. There are municipal, to a second category of these bills, these attacks that we're seeing, they're municipal preemption bills, which would have a direct impact on protections that have been established not for just the GLB community, but the transgender community. Places like Orlando and Orange County, which at the local level have created non-discrimination protections. We're seeing in some states an attempt to what we call preempt to the state level, to pass legislation that says no discrimination policy or no local ordinance will allow to go farther than state law. And in almost all of these states, there are no protections for the LGBT community at the state level. So these bills are tricky because even though they almost never specifically address us or our community, and the messaging around it that the far right puts out will never talk about us, we are the thing that is extra because we fought and won for these protections at the local level and haven't won at the state level. The bills that are in the category that we see the most of right now are what we call right to discriminate bills and what you may have heard of as religious liberty bills. Religious Freedom and Restoration Acts is what they're being called across the country. This is, I believe, really where the movement is. It's a direct response to Hobby Lobby and the Supreme Court decision around Hobby Lobby, which invoked the federal Religious Freedom and Restoration Act. These are really scary because it usually doesn't, even though we're the anchor for it, the far right revs everybody up because of the marriage moment around us and says, are we really going to allow a cake maker or a photographer to be sued by non-discrimination laws because they don't want to participate in a same-sex wedding because of their religious conviction? Is that really what we want to allow? So it creates this tension between religious rights and civil rights for the LGBT community. But in many of these states, these laws are not specific to us. And if these broadened religious exemption bills were to roll out, it would have implications on all kinds of communities and protected classes that have nothing to do with us. But it's certainly, we have become the anchor of the messaging for it. And then finally, we've seen marriage carve-out bills, bills that directly go at the issue of marriage. Things that say that public officials who have a religious belief shouldn't have to perform ceremonies of same-sex couples. And these are ranging all over the place. But I would say the places where HRC is the most focused are the anti-trans bills, the municipal preemption bills, and the right to discriminate bills. I feel like I might be going long, and I'm going to count on Gina Duncan to pull out a big hook if she needs to. But I want to talk about Florida, if that's okay, and the bill here in Florida. I know there's been some discussion on it already. So there's a couple of important things to know. First of all, is everyone clear on what it was that was filed in the Florida House already? Let me just very quickly summarize it. So it's close to what I just said. It's a bill, and it's the most aggressive, most invasive, most anti-business version of this that we've seen anywhere in the country. It was filed in Florida by a guy named Representative Frank Artillis, who Gina actually met with. Didn't you meet with him? She can tell you about that later. He's a former Marine. He's Frank. Yeah. So this bill is the most aggressive version of that. If sex segregated facilities, a gender nonconforming or trans person uses a restroom or a locker room, and I think our bill actually articulates that your driver's license or passport must be consistent with your presented gender, and if it's not, then you could be sued. Is your question?
The original one was birth certificate.
Birth certificate was on there too?
Biological.
Yeah. That's right. We went through a small amendment process. It didn't get much better, but yes. So there was a hearing that already happened. I think that one thing that's important to note about this, which is just from a strategic perspective, for those of you who are watching the movement at the higher levels, this bill came about because we won. It is in existence because in Miami-Dade County, after years and years of organizing and campaigning and moving through different election cycles, we finally were able to get the Miami-Dade County Commission to add gender identity and expression to the county's human rights ordinance. And there's a lesson for us in this because there's constant pressure in all of these campaigns for proactive non-discrimination protections to carve out gender identity and expression, to sort of take a piecemeal approach. And Miami, I think, is a great example of a place where that strategy was implemented, where sexual orientation was added first, and the protections for the transgender community came second. It made it impossible to not spend all of our time in that campaign talking about transgender experiences and gender identity and expression, which is a positive thing, but makes it much easier for our opposition to zero in on, right? And so these narratives about bathrooms and public safety and all of this stuff became this 3 to 6 month narrative in Miami-Dade County, revved everybody up. We won anyway, but a state representative from Miami, named Representative Frank Artillis, was so anchored in the opposition's message that he was inspired to file this bill. Now, the good news about what's happened in the Florida legislature is that the Senate bill is completely different than the House bill. And the Senate so far is showing very little appetite for addressing the issue at all. So we can talk more about the bill. We can talk more about its trajectory if you want. I am personally concerned about the next committee of reference, which Gina and I spent a lot of time talking about, and Equality Florida is all over, and HRC is all over playing support to Equality Florida's legislative and legal experience. But there is a path to kill this bill. It's the most offensive and disgusting in the country, and that's one of the reasons why we think we can kill it. But if I leave you with something, I don't want to leave you with the sense that, oh my gosh, everything's terrible. In fact, I sort of feel like it's my role when I do come and give talks like this to put a little bit of cold water, or at least focus in the moment that we're in, because so many people feel like we're about to wrap this all up, that it's all about to come to conclusion, and that in June of this year, when the Supreme Court rules on marriage, that we can wrap a big bow around this movement that so many of us have been a part of for a long time. I think folks in the trans community know that we are very far away from putting a big bow around this. But you need to know, we all need to know, and we need to recognize that that there is a coordinated, specific strategy to dismantle the protections that we've already won, and that in fact, every time we've moved forward in a really substantive way, whether it's in Miami-Dade County or at the national level or here in Florida, there is a backlash moment. And I think that's the moment we're in. And it requires vigilance and focus, some really smart organizing, and some really smart strategy. We are stronger than we've ever been, and we have the chance to kill all of this, if not most of it. But it is not because people are going to pack up and go home. It's because they're going to lean their shoulder in a moment like now, in a way that they never have before. So thank you for being here. This is part of that organizing. If you have not made a commitment to come to Equality Florida's Lobby Days, which HRC is supporting, I'm sure Gina's going to share more information about that soon. We need your voices in this mix. We cannot allow the stories and lies that they tell about trans people to be the story of that bill. We need real experiences and real stories and truth. And I think with that we win. Thank you all so much for inviting me.
Any questions for Joe?
Yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Dave.
I actually just read this morning in the WPATH listserv, there was a discussion about the bathrooms, and it was saying that the people that were talking about Title IX had actually been interpreted in previous lawsuits to cover protections for transgender persons in the bathrooms. How does that play into what you were just talking about?
Oh, Dr. Dave.
Is that such a big,
just lobbing me softballs here. That's all the way. I'm going to defer. I have a feeling that in this room there's a lot of folks who have a deeper understanding of the Title IX implications on our policies and on this moment in the legislature, at least from a legal perspective. So I'm going to let other people tackle that. I would say 20,000 feet up, I think we're collectively trying to figure out how to talk about this because it is clear that the victories through the EEOC and the Title IX protections are huge, momentous wins for the transgender community. At the same time, there's a little bit of jujitsu there because it becomes an anchor for our opponents to say we don't need to include transgender protections in these bills that we're filing and these proactive measures that we're creating because, oh, you're already protected. This has always been a heavy lift. Let's move forward with something else. And so I think we're still trying to figure out how to reconcile these two things. And the truth is that it's not, nothing's 100% there. There's all kinds of ways to analyze the EEOC decision that lead to challenges that people will have to work through. The implications I'm losing our messaging. I call it the discriminatory transgender bathroom bill, which is probably not the best way to talk about it. But I think the implications for it are not grand because right now the conversation is not based in reality. I mean, I think we did a great job as a community, and Gina was there, and Equality Florida's Nadine Smith was there, and Carlos Smith, who's one of their public policy team members now. If you were to watch the hearing in the Civil Justice Committee and see what they were saying as they carted up their crazy, and then seeing what our team said, on our side you saw the experiences of transgender people articulated in a way after 15 years of doing work in this movement that I've never seen. You saw some of the most passionate, articulate, professional people get up and say, I can't even reconcile that you would bring this to this committee. People breaking down in tears, staring at the chair saying, why would you try and do this to me? And then on their side, you would see people get up and say, this has nothing to do with transgender people. We don't want them discriminated against any more than anyone else. This is about protecting children and women from sexual predators in restrooms. And then you have legislators who sit on the Criminal Justice Committee saying, hey, hold on. Don't we have 1,000 laws that make it illegal to assault or harass or rape or batter or hurt women or children, whether in a bathroom or not? How can that be the reason why we have this bill? And it's Tallahassee. It's like sometimes logic is not what is creating policy. And so I think that is so deep in the weeds in this conversation that actually what we need to understand on this bill is that we're at war, that this is going to be a duked out battle, and it will be in the Beltway and behind the curtain, and it'll be public, and all of that strategy is coming together in a way. But I think the role for people in this room is those stories were powerful. They resonated. Gina and I, I'm sorry I'm going long, but Gina and I had this conversation just before I came up about how frustrated I was with members that I had served with and the votes that they cast on that committee and the things that they said because I know them. To you all, they're just sort of crazy Republican legislators, but I ate lunch with them every day. And I was like, I cannot believe that you would even put this up for a hearing. But at the same time, there were members who voted for the bill, but spoke out in a way that was so unexpected and surprising and were willing to grab onto, they received the experiences and the turmoil from these people and then anchored themselves in logic and said, this bill has major problems, and even though I will vote for it today, you may not have my vote moving forward. You need to work on this. And that kind of directive really matters. Maybe one last question.
Yeah, one more question.
Okay.
I was just wondering, you just mentioned we're at war. Could you explain to the member how we're at war?
Sure. Let's combine questions, if that's okay. Yeah.
Okay. I just have a quick question here. So Frank Artilla is in his 40s. I meet the demographics of Frank Artilla's. I'm in my 40s. I'm a veteran. I'm a businessman. I am everything that this bill is going to require me to go into a female bathroom. Has any strategies been out there putting someone like me or other trans men next to Frank Artilla as the one that introduced this bill Because with this bill, what my interpretation of it is that if it does pass, it means that I will be required to use a female bathroom. Does that not also mean that any person that presents as male is allowed to enter a female bathroom without objection, because they're asking the females in the bathroom to regulate gender or sex from the bathroom goers? And so that's what I don't understand about this bill is it's actually forcing the over 7-8 million women in the state of Florida to regulate who is male and who is not in their own bathrooms.
So the three central messages on this particular bill, I think, this is still being worked through. It was introduced quickly. It started moving quickly in a way that we absolutely didn't expect. Again, kudos to Equality Florida and specifically Gina for being absolutely nimble. I mean, Gina, within a week of it being filed, was up there literally meeting with the face of the opposition, Representative Artiles, and a slew of other people. And I think that kind of work really matters, and that quickness to it does. But I think the three central messages are one, this is unnecessary for a lot of different reasons. The specter of women and children being hurt in bathrooms because of non-discrimination protections at the local level or even the state level has never come to fruition. It doesn't exist. It doesn't happen. It's smoke and mirrors for anti-transphobia. Two, it's unenforceable for a lot of the reasons you just described. And three, it is outright discriminatory. And I think that while those messages matter, this is not education policy. It's not a transportation bill. It's not a food fight between doctors and nurse practitioners. It is a visceral thing that is based on almost the theater of the process and visuals. And we've talked a lot about that some of these members who sort of like, they don't understand the trans experience, they don't understand who this community is, they can't articulate it in their minds, and so they get scared and think it's controversial. And so they pivot back to this, wait, am I about to, by voting no on this, make it possible for a quote-unquote man in a dress to use a restroom next to my daughter? That makes me uncomfortable. I think they need to see our community and see you sitting next to Frank and ask themselves, so if I vote in favor of this bill, I'm telling you, sir, to go into a restroom with my daughter? I think that's the perfect juxtaposition. And we've talked a lot about that. It is like guerrilla education on trans issues, which is super problematic and challenging. But I do think at the end of the day, we've gotten as far as we have on all of the issues we work on because people were willing to show up, be a part of the process, and tell their stories passionately, unequivocally, and authentically. There are opportunities to do that at committee hearings on this bill and at lobby days. And if you're not there and not planning to be there, we need you to rethink that and plan to be there. Thank you all so much. Thank you.
I didn't get my question answered. I was just asking, you mentioned about we're at war, and I was just wondering how you said we're at war.
Well, I think for all the reasons we've talked about, I think that we see a really coordinated attempt to roll back our protections, and we shouldn't sit back on that. I think we need to lean in. That's what I would say.
So the reason why I say that is because I mentioned before to Dr. Baker-Hargrove before that I felt that I was in war because I was discriminated against for using the restroom. Okay, I was discriminated in 2009 for using the restroom, and twice in 2012, and I filed a complaint with OSHA for unlawful restrictions of the restroom. And then I also contacted corporate. I worked in a Disney property at Starwood Hotels. And the thing was, and so I tried to go through the channels all the way from 2009 to also June of 2012, and also October 2012. I tried to go through the corporate. I tried to, there's some Disney properties, Starwood, Swan Dolphin. I guess you're having the meeting over there. I was working in the banquets there for over 14 years. Okay, and I was there 7 years, one direction, and 7 years as I am now. And I had my license changed, I had a court order, I had all these things done. I went to HR and they were supposed to protect me, but I felt like I was in war with them because the thing is I was trying to fight for my life, for my identity, not to be assaulted. My life was threatened there. A lot of things that happened to me through there. And through the grace of God, I was able to survive it all. But then when I tried to go for some help and some understanding, I wasn't really got the understanding. And I mentioned to Dr. Hargrove one time that felt like I was in a war, and I felt like I was being assaulted. My life was being threatened. I was under a lot of trauma.
We're not to interrupt you. We are going to have a breakout session, a panel discussion. So if I could ask you to hold that thought for that discussion, that would be a great point for us to discuss.
That's one of those things. That the reason why is because when you mentioned that word war, that's how I felt. And was I in the military or not? But it is a fight, it is a war. We're fighting for our survival, we're fighting for our life, we're fighting
Absolutely.
for our right to be us, for our gender identity. And when you see this bill over here, I used to be a police officer also. So when you see over here that they're going to criminalize using the restroom, and I mentioned Gina before, Gina and I have both the same name and so forth, and we know each other for some years. It's totally wrong. It's only because of people's ignorance and so forth, because you don't understand, how the people are, And I'm thankful for this meeting here. Thankful that people are doing something about it and trying to get people involved and educating people. And thank you for you, whoever else is here. Thank you for all your involvement.
Well, and thank you for being here as well, and we look forward to hearing from you again. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a rare treat, and I am so honored that our very own mayor, Mayor Buddy Dyer, is here to address the group. Ladies and gentlemen, Mayor Buddy Dyer.
Welcome to Orlando City Hall. I think you'll find that our city is one that embraces diversity, that welcomes and embraces fairness and equality. We have taken a number of measures over the years. In fact, probably 12 years ago, we extended our anti-discrimination laws to sexual orientation. Commissioner Patty Sheehan led that fight, and it was quite a heated battle. And last year we added gender identity, and I'm not sure that did we even have anybody that came and spoke against that? I don't think so. So attitudes have changed over the past 15 years here, and I've followed the teachings, I guess, of Richard Florida, who's an economist that says the cities that are going to be successful in the future are those that embrace diversity, embrace equality, tolerance, fairness. So not only is it the right thing to do, it's the economically right thing to do for your community. And we're on a pretty good roll here in Orlando. We had probably the most unbelievable weekend we've ever had. We have built 3 new community venues here in the past several years. One is a new performing arts center, which is located right over here. And then if you look out the windows over here, you can see the Amway Center and the Orlando Citrus Bowl, and in between that we're planning a new soccer stadium. So on Friday and Sunday night we had Magic games. On Saturday we had Elton John perform in the Amway Center. On Sunday we had 62,000 people for our first MLS game. In addition to that, we had the ballet performing at the Performing Arts Center, so all 3 of our new venues were active on Sunday, as well as Sunrail, which is our new commuter rail train, and we were able to bring about 10,000 of the fans to Orlando on Sunrail. I appreciate Gina bringing this conference, seminar, gathering, summit to Orlando, and know that our City Hall is always open to you. So thank you very much, and thank you to Gina for everything you do.
Thank you, Mayor Dyer. Thank you so much, Mayor Dyer. And Frank Billingsley, Chief of Staff. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give him a big hand. Thank you so much. What a great surprise. I would like to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for being here and for taking the time to learn more and be visible and to help the transgender community progress and get where we want to go. Because we certainly want to stand shoulder to shoulder with our LGBTQA brothers and sisters for equality for all. And before I say anything else, I do want to thank my Equality Florida team. If y'all could stand up, or the Equality Florida folks that are here. Thank y'all so much for setting up and doing all of this stuff. These young people work so hard. They travel. They're probably going to, be in Gainesville tonight or in Tallahassee in the morning or whatever. So they are just everywhere. So thank you for all you do, and thank you for all you do, because you are here because you care, and you will make a difference. Someday, and maybe not in my lifetime, but maybe someday being transgender will have as much significance as being blue-eyed or left-handed, because after all, that's the way we were born. Thank you for being here, and have a great evening.